All right, my beautiful muses, and this is why young love is romanticized and rarely survives reality. For those of you that are new to my channel, my name is Danielle. I'm the founder of Muse. Muse stands for Mentoring Unique Skills Eloquently. We come here to learn and grow so you can become your most attractive selves, so you can sell better and grow your own brand in a unique way. Welcome, welcome. I know you guys came here so you can hear my full breakdown about Christy and Desmond, the social media stars that have recently signed divorce papers. Now, before we go into any breakdown or any opinions, for those of you that don't know those social media stars, they're a famous social media couple. They put a lot of family content. And the reason why it's such a big deal nowadays is because, well, they generated millions of followers because they are very entertaining. I'm one of their fans. I thought they were hilarious together. It was very sad for me to hear this news. Christy especially is popular, but I'll go more into that as far as the psychological breakdown of all of this. Of course, I got really curious looking at all of the content revolving around them. There are relationship coaches, both men and women, doing a breakdown of what they see. And of course, the fans that have been following them for a while, sharing their opinions on what they've observed over the years throughout their relationship and throughout what they see on camera. Because the reality is that couples don't show everything on camera, right? So with my hungry curiosity, I went ahead and read through a lot of content. I saw sides on Desmond's side and sides on Christy's side. Very valid breakdowns. But overall, I see that everybody is pointing out to the fact that they got into a relationship at 14 years old. And that does matter, by the way, for a reason. Because for those of you that don't know, usually our frontal lobe part of the brain is not fully developed until age 25. If two people started at 14 years old and they're still developing, and boom, they're already married, they're finding out like, gosh, we're pretty different people. What attracted us back then is very different than what is attracting us now as adults. But you kind of have to stick through that if you're already married, right? So I can see why every single person is bringing up that factor, and I can definitely go deep into that as well. There was a relationship coach who brought up the fact that it's very important to understand that not everything needs to be broadcasted all over the internet. That relationship coach suggested that people should hide 80% of their life off of social media. And I love that she put a number to it because there are people like me who actually appreciates hearing number percentages because it grounds us. I don't know how many of you out there are like me, but it's an interesting phenomenon in how far we've come in the digital age. It's as if a relationship status isn't real unless it's changed on social media. It's like the whole saying, pics or else it isn't real. But excessive visibility with your lover can be very risky. Hence, look at how Desmond and Christy are underneath a magnifying glass. They have zero privacy. On the other hand, I've had women come into my sessions and cry and tell me that they have been bottling up inside, knowing that they've been in a relationship with a man for 3 years plus, and he had never shown her on social media. That can really do something to a person. In hindsight, I can see why that relationship coach suggested 80% should be off of social media, and the other 20% should be on simple things like general anniversaries, birthdays, Valentine's Day, all of that. But this isn't a lecture to tell you what you should and shouldn't do in your relationship. I'm bringing this because I thought that was an interesting observation and seeing how much we've evolved over the years and what it's turned into as far as modern relationships and dating. Of course, feel free to share in the comments what you think about that, because that can be quite a controversy. Understandably so. Now, let's bring back the fact that everyone keeps talking about how Christy and Desmond have been together since 14 years old. As I mentioned early on, why that detail matters is because, again, our frontal lobe is not fully developed. People don't really know each other until they're fully developed. And even more so, every day, they're still learning more about themselves. They're constantly evolving. That's how we are as humans. But there's a drastic difference to what we're like at 14 to what we're like at 25 or older. The needs are going to be different. The way you look at life is going to be different. And if the values are way too different, you're going to be growing apart. And fortunately, I might say, they've built a public brand and they did well with it. Unfortunately, every move they make is constantly scrutinized by people in the internet. And that can really do something to you psychologically, especially at a young age. They're both young. It can get pretty messy. Now, remember in my previous video, I was saying that the overall core message everyone is learning from this couple is how it's so important to find a lover that is equally yoked with you. Again, it does not mean that you guys need to have the same finances. It does, however, mean that you guys need similar views in how money is used and how you guys value and view families, and how you guys both carry health with the level of importance. Do you both highly value it, or do either of you not value it so much? As one of the fans in the audience watching Christy and Desmond, the imbalance that a lot of us saw was too obvious to not notice. Christy was getting way more attention than Desmond. I mean, she was really going out there with all kinds of shenanigans and pranks on her husband. And her husband kind of played more of the supporting role. Towards the end, before she actually signed the divorce papers, I did kind of notice that Desmond was not as reactive to her shenanigans. If anything, he looked annoyed. So that was a pretty big sign that things weren't about to work out for long. Now, everyone is coming up with all kinds of theories of why he cheated. There's no justification for cheating. Cheating is wrong. But I can see why relationship coaches broke it down psychologically as far as Desmond being a yes man or a yes dear, just saying yes to everything instead of trying to hold down the line with Christy's shenanigans. And that makes sense. As rebellious as we ladies can be, we do appreciate a man who knows how to put things in order. There is something very sexy about that. That is masculine. And there were relationship coaches saying that when men are very intimidated at their woman, like they're not as equally yoked in competence, the fastest way to humble her is to cheat on her. As messed up as that sounds, I've had that happen to me firsthand with one of my exes. He was so irritated that I was constantly studying during relaxing time and constantly looking for ways to build more wealth, even though he's already wealthy himself. He wanted more and more of my attention, but I didn't give that to him. My studies of wealth was taking over his attention, and so he felt that he needed to cheat on me. Gosh, did that tick me off. To which the relationship ended. And I know that that had to do with him being intimidated by me, because when he saw me cry, he said, "Oh, did that hurt?" But he said that like as if he took pleasure in that. Because that revealed to me that he felt very small and he needed to find a way to make me, in his eyes, smaller. When the relationship coach broke it down like that, not necessarily justifying what Desmond did, I can easily see that being very valid. Again though, no excuse. Cheating is wrong. And of course, as all of these tabloids are going out, everyone is clicking on their individual page. You can see that Desmond is all of a sudden pushing his chef and branding content out there because he's on his own now. And Christy, per usual, is putting more content like she already has been. And it's very natural for this to happen in relationships. Fame and success can be a gigantic mirror for what you might not be doing. And that's why one or both get very insecure of each other, unfortunately. And yeah, even though both people are successful, resentment can still grow because of that constant mirror. That mirror can never be avoided, no matter what kind of relationship you get into. I want to go deeper on this with my personal first-hand experience in my previous relationships. I know I shared the one where I had an ex that cheated on me to humble me, right? I've been out with somebody who didn't necessarily see money as a tool like I did. I took money planning so seriously and wanting to attain more freedom, and he saw that as intense and wanting to avoid and just play video games. So that's a very clear example of a relationship that is not equally yoked. Another unequally yoked relationship I was in was when initially me and the other person were both highly valuing health. We exercised often, we ate healthy, but at some point their health was declining. So every time I went out to work out or take care of myself, I was accused for potentially cheating on them. All of my health practices were all of a sudden a threat to them. Again, that's just the mirror action taking its place, which causes insecurity and resentment. Those kind of dynamics are exhausting. Definitely not stable. So being with somebody that's equally yoked, you guys got to make sure that your financial path is very similar and your health practice are in line. All right, now let's go to the part where this may ruffle some feathers because I know this is uncomfortable to talk about. So on the topic of Christy and Desmond being in a relationship at 14, that needs to be evaluated because this immediately makes me think of how teenage love, prom culture, and the consequences that come with it is way too casual nowadays. It's so normal for these kids to lose their virginity at 18 or after prom. Like there's some kind of pressure that that's the time to lose your virginity. Most of you are likely going to say, oh, Danielle, that's harmless. That's not a big deal. But it's totally romanticized in American culture, especially because, well, when kids make poor choices and they grow up into adults with a lot of financial problems, they're easier to control. And don't get me wrong, it's normal to have crushes at 14 or in your teen years, the whole puppy love thing, sure, whatever. I don't have a problem with that. The issue I have is premature sex and premature emotional responsibility, or lack thereof. I'm very aware that we have sex education, but sex education is not enough. It's not enough to know the body and how it works, and only knowing about STIs and STDs that can be contracted to it. Kids nowadays need way more than that when it comes to sex ed. The reality that boys rarely hear about, or at least until it's too late, is that even if you don't marry the women that you have sex with, if they get pregnant, women will abuse the law by getting the government for you to pay child support. So when you're young, dumb, and full of you know what, and you're having all these accidental babies, and you don't even have a lot of money to begin with, you are screwed. I can think of a handful of men who are in a serious depression because they put themselves in that situation, not thinking they're going to experience a lot of consequences just getting girls pregnant. And then for the women, the reality with birth controls, they can't fully be trusted. And these birth controls and contraceptives have long-term effects to their health. Because, okay, they mature at an age and they're ready to have a baby. There's a reason why there's a lot of women that are dependent on IVF now, because they've developed a lot of health problems from taking those contraceptives. Of course, they're not going to talk about that in sex ed, right? I also know a friend, I'm not going to mention any names, but they literally conceived a child even while using protection. When they say it only protects 99.9%, that 0.01% is still pretty potent, and that's literally how my friend got born. So... Oh, and also when women are having sex with these guys and none of these guys are on the path to becoming their husband, like they're just a guy that they had sex with and get pregnant by, the government does not treat those kids as blessings. They get treated as liabilities. That's why they're called oopsie babies. So that kid is gonna grow up with instability. And unfortunately, this is so common that it's not treated urgently. There's nothing cute about putting those babies in stressful situations. And don't get me wrong, babies are blessings. I think it's beautiful that parents figure out a way because they're not always prepared. No parent is. But can't you put effort by actually being disciplined and setting up a better future before the kid is actually born? You would think that's common sense. When I think about my teenage self, I wish that my parents really drilled into me more about the consequences. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love them. They only knew what they knew then, but they were pretty lenient with so many things. I would praise them and thankful for being so lenient, but in the long run, I look back and had this unconscious resentment towards them because they were way too loosey-goosey with my rules. Like, I was looking at situations that I regret because I didn't feel any urgency around these consequences. I don't necessarily think that parents should be overly controlling or cruel to their kids, but they do need to keep it real. Thinking about my teenage self, yeah, sure, my feelings probably would have gotten hurt, but if it's very real, something I know to be true and fact, despite the sting, I would gain a lot of respect and I'd follow through. So yeah, unfortunately, it's common for parents to want to be best friends with their kid so they don't veer off too far. But unfortunately, when there's too much freedom, the kids grow up as adults getting too comfortable with chaos. And here's another thing. I want to talk about entrepreneurial couples and polarity, attraction between masculine and femininity. This is an interesting to think about because I follow different entrepreneurial couples. There are couples that have a firm stance behind never working together in the same company because it's like ishing where you eat. And then there's another stance where there are couples that firmly believe, yeah, absolutely work together, absolutely network together, do all kinds of things together. I see the pros and cons in both. Because with my own personal experiences, I can recall an ex where we got excited about working together as a power couple in entrepreneurship. However, unfortunately, over time, I saw that it turned into a co-working relationship and the attraction was going away. It was no longer feeling like a relationship. It was just feeling like a co-working relationship where we sometimes go out and see the movies together and give each other affection. So I can see why there are couples who are not wanting to do that. However, I also see the pros to entrepreneur couples that want to do something together. Because again, going back to my firsthand experiences, I've been with somebody who is not an entrepreneur while I am, and I saw how it would feel a little awkward because while I'm putting a lot of work into my entrepreneurship business, and those of you who are entrepreneurs, you know how much work actually goes into entrepreneurship. The person who doesn't do entrepreneurship has no idea what it takes. They're just seeing like, oh, she's so obsessed with work, she's just avoiding me. So that could cause constant friction. So in that sense, I can see why it can be difficult to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't have a similar lifestyle like you. Now, I don't necessarily think that couples need to be in the same brand or need to be in the same company, but if they do, it does require a huge level of understanding. I mean, look at Alex and Lila Hormozi. I've listened to a lot of entrepreneurs and talk about their relationship, and the core message I hear from all of them, they all say that you absolutely have to be with somebody that's very understanding of your goals. Boom. So with Christy and Desmond, it seemed like their goals were pretty aligned, or they were trying to make it work together as a whole brand. But yeah, the inevitable happened. Christy's fame was just going faster, and that made Desmond very uncomfortable. He had to find ways to cope. As far as generational thinking, both people in a relationship need their eye on the same prize, equally yoked in growing their family together, their legacy, and their overall vision as their third entity, because one has their own entity, the other one has their own entity, but together they have a third entity. And generational stability is different from fame and attention, because fame and attention by itself can be another costly thing, which needs a lot of careful preparation when that happens. And listen, I'm not here to criticize this couple. I love this couple. I loved them together. This is where a chapter ends and another chapter begins for the both of them. The reality is, you guys, is that conflicts exist in relationships no matter what. You can't be in a relationship where there's no conflict. There's no such thing. When you guys are constantly mirroring each other, there's gonna be friction. It's not always a bad thing. It's part of growing pains. If you're a human and you experience emotions, you can't avoid conflict. Even if you try to avoid conflict, literally, that's still conflict. That's gonna cause emotions to the other person if you're avoiding them. And it's very common for people to try to win, and that's why it causes the fight to be worse. But the opportunity for couples is to work on their style of resolving together where both people are winning. And let me share something with you guys that changed my life big time from my previous mentors. It's important to have agreements, because most couples, they have a set of beliefs, they start acting up, and they start making assumptions rather than agreements. The word agreements is a game changer for me, because there had been many times in my life, I'm sure you experienced this too, but so many times where I get frustrated with the lovers in my relationships. And my mentors would ask me, why are you so frustrated? And I would share my frustration. And my mentor would ask, did you make an agreement around that with them though? And then I'm sit with that reality. I'm like, you know what? No, I didn't establish any agreement around that. I just assumed that they should know that that would frustrate me. Whenever you're mad about something, I need you to get real with yourself. Say, did I actually talk about that and create an agreement with this person? No? I should probably confront that and create an agreement around that. That bar right there drastically changed the way I handle relationships or any damage control or any sort of conflict, whether it's through romantic relationships or business relationships. Shoot, even friendships. So if you really think about it, that's where resentment comes from. It comes from assumptions and expectations that were never spoken. So yeah, that's all I had to say for now. This isn't to shame anybody or to tell you how you should live your life, Just felt that I had to gather the insight that I've gained over the years and see the patterns that align with what we're seeing with Desmond and Christy and what I'm seeing with my personal lived experiences and things I actually wish that I heard when I was younger. So if you're single and you're being discerning as far as what to look for in your future lover, just keep in mind on what equally yoked looks like for you. What are the things that you highly value in your life while you're single? That 10 out of 10 feeling. Does that person align with that? Is there gonna be any friction? Or even if you're not single and you're in a relationship right now, I want you to think about how you guys resolve things. And do you guys build each other up constantly, no matter how many times you guys are constantly evolving? How often are you maybe allowing your insecurity to take over you and try to bring your partner down? Any reflections, questions, comments, go ahead and drop it below.